put out a fire in the kitchen and inhaled, and it caused an infection, and he went into heart failure.
Oh, really?
My husband called my job at the time the life ruiner. Like, that's how he referred to.
Okay.
Yeah, I was exhausted. I was getting up at 3. Like, I would fall asleep at dinner parties on a Friday night.
That's a big thing. What am I? If I'm not a TV personality, if I'm not a gymnast, what am I?
And that was where the internal work really started.
Well, welcome to the Epicest. My name is Doug. I'm the host, and today I have an amazing guest. I'm so excited about this, Lianne Laing. And I'm not going to do a lot of introduction around you, Lianne, because I'm sure you could just tell us a bit about yourself and, around your interest in health and sort of your history of you were sharing it with me earlier. I've only just met you, so
I know this is kind of like starting from scratch.
Yeah, I'm good. That's the way I like it.
All right.
Tell me about yourself.
It's like I've lived a whole bunch of different lives and had so many different interests, all of which I think at the end of the day come back to health and wellness. So, but I'm born and raised in Ottawa. I left for a couple of years to go to school in the States. I was a gymnast, so training at an elite level from the time I was 6.
You were a gymnast.
I was a gymnast.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
See, I'm going to learn stuff.
You're going to learn a ton of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I was, at 6 years old, I was starting to train. By 9, I was in there 20 hours a week. Competed. I loved it. I loved the sport. For me, I wasn't going to make the Olympic team, but I was, one of like a national level athlete. But the top 5, top 6 go to the Olympics, and what happens to the rest of us?
Yeah.
So there's a good chunk. I think probably the next 15 of us or so ended up in the States on a scholarship. So had an amazing education and a wonderful opportunity to compete. NCAA, which is a very different sports feel when you're in the States.
Yes.
Anything NCAA. It's like, I try to explain it to people, just have different, it's just next level when you're competing there. So I loved my years. I was at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, graduated with 2 business degrees, came home. My mom has a massive gymnastics school. It's called Corona Gym Club. She's actually in the last year just retired. So I should say here in Ottawa.
Okay.
So she owned Corona. She started it 50 years ago, started from one child in the high school gym and has, almost 2,000 kids that go through the gym every year.
I'm going to go down off on tangents. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
That's how my brain works. So can you she shut it down or she sold it? Or
She retired. It took us years of convincing her to retire, but it was time. So, and really started the gym from scratch, and is probably one of the largest clubs in the country. So, she's done an amazing job, and that's on an entire level. Another story of like having my mother as my coach.
Yes.
And so I could go off on the years of sports psychology and how we managed that relationship. Especially I was very close with my dad, but they were divorced. So, living and everything with my coach and my mom, and it was.
Oh, you lived with her and.
Yes. I was very close with my dad, but it was still back in the 80s, like you didn't have the 50-50 split that we do now. In any case, when I graduated, I came home and my mother was having her 25th anniversary of the gymnastics school. And so I was about to head to Toronto to take a job after graduation, but my mom asked me to send out some press releases, try to help get some media coverage. And the television crew, which at the time was called CHRO, came out to cover the event. They asked me to go on camera just to explain what was happening. And I gave them the rundown on camera. And when we were done the interview, they stopped and he gave me his boss's business card and said, "We're looking for a young female, university educated, former elite athlete to be our new sports anchor."
Wow.
And I was on TV 5 days later and had a 20-year career in Ottawa on television. So, I went from being this all-star gymnast and then, trying to figure out where my life was going to go. And then the next thing I know, I'm a TV personality and growing up on television for 20 years in the city. So
would you say you were a natural? Like that's a whole shift.
I think what was ideal for me, and I think why I was a likely candidate is I knew what being an athlete was like. And at the time, CHRO, the new RO, changed to A Channel, then CTV. Like there was a lot of name changes, but it was very interactive. Like I was involved in the stories. And I think being an athlete and understanding what athletes are going through, looking at it from a different perspective, understanding injuries and all of the different things that happen in an athlete's life, I think I could bring to the job. Plus, I think the critical part was I was 22 years old and I was spending a lot of time in NHL or hockey. You know, I was in the Sens locker room. I was in but I wasn't intimidated by these athletes at 22. And at the time it was people who ended up being my, best friends like Chris Phillips and Wade Redden and Daniel Alfredson. Like we were all growing up together. Like we were all in our early 20s as we established it. But I wasn't intimidated by it because those were my peers at university. Like all of my friends at school were baseball players, hockey players, football players who were going on to big professional careers. And they were my friends. Like, so I was able to it was a natural element for me. And I think people saw that I was comfortable on camera and I was passionate. Like I was really passionate about it. So it was a great job, but I was 22 and having to learn everything live on TV. Like there was no training. It was like you sink or swim.
Seriously, like you showed up and it was like, okay.
Yeah, they showed up and there was
we're going to start shooting right now. And
and there was like, you're off to the Sens locker room, training camp starts. And it was like, I had to figure it out. And at the time I had to do my own camera work. I had to learn how to do my own editing. I was doing the weekend sports, so I had to learn how to cut and edit highlights and learn highlights. But I think the hardest thing was learning the intricate details of all the sports because I was telling stories, but I had to learn about Formula One and golf and curling and horse racing and like I had to learn about everything. So there was a lot, but I'm a competitive person, So you figure it out.
And you would like you said, you would understand what it takes to prepare for a competition, prepare for a game, all the, weeks and months even that goes into before the game, before the competition, right? A lot of people don't understand that. They watch someone in sports and they go, oh, they're really good. Well, you don't know the blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting there,
Yeah. I think is the sprinter, you see him run for I don't know what he broke it at, 9 something seconds, right? It's like, you don't understand the 4 years of training that goes into that, that quick race. So, definitely. And I think what I found was really special is because I was at the station for so long, I met kids young, like in junior hockey or starting out, or like Gabriela Dubrowski, the tennis player. Like I remember covering her at 11 years old, at the Rideau Tennis Club.
Right.
Now I see her at winning doubles at Wimbledon. Nice. I remember like covering these athletes throughout their careers. So I found that was really special at the time too.
So let me ask you about being a celebrity. So
it's Ottawa celebrity, right? Like I put that in perspective when you say that. It's Ottawa.
You walk around the streets of Ottawa, people might recognize you. Was that something you'd have to keep in check? Even doing the national competitions in gymnastics, you become known. Like I know for Vonda, it's...
Yeah. If we talk about Vonda was a Romanian Olympic gymnast.
Yes.
She was royalty.
Yes.
Like Romanian gymnastics in the time when I was growing up.
It was big
like
thing.
I remember watching Vonda, as a gymnast being, you're looking at Russian and Romanian and Chinese in those years. They were royalty.
Right.
I definitely didn't have that. I mean, and the sport just wasn't as big here in Canada, so it wasn't like that. But I think what was interesting is because I grew up on camera, I was 22. So the viewers saw me grow up. They saw me get engaged. My dad, unfortunately, died of a heart attack 2 weeks before my wedding. They saw me go through that process, getting married, being pregnant. I carried 2 babies, like 2 pregnancies on air, sharing the stories. I did a segment called Oh Baby. Like, I feel like I was kind of living my life anyway on camera.
Yeah.
So I think I just became very connected with the community. And I think that's what's allowed me to take on the job that I'm doing now at the Ottawa Heart Institute, which there's probably 10 steps in there that I missed, but I feel very fortunate that I have such a strong connection to the city. And I forget that people recognize me. Do you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden someone will say, hey, can I get a picture? Like I have forgotten that I was this TV personality at one point.
How long has it been?
I left the station after 20 years, and I left in November of 2017.
Okay.
So it's actually been quite some
7 years. Yeah.
Quite some time.
7 years.
Yeah. And I still get it. Like I will still get stopped. And my kids were young too, so they didn't really see or get to feel there was a lot of bonuses to it. There was a lot of things we got to do because of it.
Yes.
And so sometimes the kids will, oh yeah, I remember that we used to do those things.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So when you left TV, which you say a lot of people don't do, they don't by choice.
That I was able to leave by choice.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I think I'm very grateful to have had that opportunity.
And then
that
what
I had
happened?
time to prepare for it. Like I knew in June, and I think I told you, and I've talked about this openly, but I ended up with a case of shingles in June, which was in June of 2017, which was incredibly painful.
Did you leave because of the shingles, or you got the
left
shingles
because and let's talk about like what our bodies tell us, and I think why your podcast is, is people have interest, is I listen to my body.
Okay.
I have always had to depend on my body. From the time I was 6, like I was an athlete. So I would listen to my body when it was injured or when it was tired or when I knew that it was in its peak performance.
Right.
I was getting up at 3:30 a.m. Monday to Friday, going to bed at 10 p.m. because I had 2 kids in competitive sports. Like I was lacking sleep. I was in a pressure job. Like I think I was just tired. And were
you able to some degree still try and maintain your health through exercise? And
like absolutely. Like my day was, I got up at 3:30. I was at the station by 4:15. We were on air at 5 because I had to tape everything for the airport. Like there were lots of things we had to do, and then we were on air from 6 until 10. So then we had a 4-hour show. We had meetings at 11, and then because I was kind of the main personality, I was always out doing extra shoots or commercials. So my days probably ended at around 2, and then immediately from there I went to the gym. Okay. I never went home. Like I had everything packed. Because if I went home, I was never going to leave the house again. Right. So I went from work right to the gym, and I got in my workout, and then right from my workout, I went and picked up my kids at school because I hadn't seen them since,
Non-stop
and then from
action.
school, it was off to sports and activities, and then dinner, and then packing all my bags, lunches, everything, and then getting to bed by 10. So the days were long, and I think after 20 years, I was starting to feel like the job was Groundhog Day. Right. Like I was covering things and doing things for the 20th time. Right. If that, I felt like some of the interviews I could do on my own. Like I didn't need the actual guest there. I could do the segment. But when I got the shingles and my body was on fire, I recognized that my body was red flags, that it knew what my mind already knew that I was done. And it was like my body screaming at me to say, like, listen, like you're done here. So I listened to my body. It was really that simple. Like it was the shingles that got me thinking. And I went into my boss's office and I said, I think I'm done. I've done everything. There's nowhere left for me to go unless I move cities. And I've done 20 years, but I was 42 at the time. Yeah. And I was like, I still have so much left that if I leave now, I have an opportunity to have another 20-year career at something else. So we spent some time. There was a lot of back and forth, and then it was agreed that I would leave in November. Okay. So that's what happened.
Can I just talk about the shingles because I'm not actually very familiar. I've had friends who have it. So it starts inside, but it can manifest externally.
Outside. Yeah, it starts inside, and then all of a sudden you get some people will get it in their eye. Yes. Mine was in my armpits. Okay,
and it's like a rash almost.
Yeah, but it's like you're on fire. Yeah, like when I say like you're on fire, like you're burning. Yeah. And then the rash, just like very few people have seen pictures of what I actually look like during that time. So it's painful. It's an immune. Like you carry it, and then sometimes something triggers, and
you would attribute that to exhaustion, and
I think it was my body's way of saying, "Wake up."
And is there anything you can take for that? How do you treat shingles?
Yes, you should get the vaccine. I think anyone over the age of 50 should have gotten the shingles vaccine. Okay. And then if you've had shingles within there's a certain amount of time, you can't get the vaccine until there's a certain amount of time. And I was young to get it. I was definitely young to get it. Like I went to the doctor's office that morning, and he looked at what I was going on, and he's like, you just have a rash. And then about 5 hours later, I was like on fire. Yeah. Just because they didn't expect someone that young to get it. Okay. Yeah, it was fun.
Sure, that sounds amazing.
It was horrible. So but some people get it on their face and their eye. Like there's it's horrible. And then some people just get a small little thing and it passes.
Yes. And you stopped working, and then because now did you take a break?
No, I didn't take a break.
Brilliant.
I
Because I was going to ask you if taking time off helped.
I should have taken a break.
Yes.
Like when I talk to people now who have an opportunity to regroup and to kind of look at where their passions are and figure out what their purpose is, I've tell them all the time now when I speak to people in transition, take the time to actually decompress and heal mentally, heal physically, get your body back to peak performance. Don't try to rush into anything. We all go into panic mode. I need to get paid. I need to, like, you kind of, and
you're used to working.
Yeah, and you're used to working.
Busy.
And so I should have taken probably some time to really think about what I wanted to do. But no, within 2 weeks of me leaving television, I had a website ready to go. I had my podcast in the making. I had all the things that I had wanted to do with the podcast. I was starting to develop. I did a wellness cruise in Europe, and I was enlisting. I had health and wellness experts. I signed on with Expedia cruise ships. I had a ton of projects on the go. I knew I was going to be doing probably some media consulting and some speaking. So no, I went like full force, not knowing what exactly I was doing. So
did you go full force because you had these things in the works before you?
No, I had nothing in the works really before. I knew I wanted to do the podcast, but no. And I think a lot of people thought when I left TV, I had something really big planned.
Yeah,
I really didn't. Like when I told people, they was like, "Well, can't wait for your announcement."
Your
and
next big thing, yeah.
I'm like, I don't have an announcement. I really just knew I needed to leave.
So let me ask you this, Lianne. I want to ask you
Yeah.
about, because I think there's a psychology behind keeping busy too, right? And so when you left and people were saying, what's your next big thing? And did you feel almost a pressure to do more, or because I find a lot of people have trouble not doing something for a while.
I think for me, I had a lot of internal work to do. The biggest thing for me was the releasing of the ego.
Right.
I had to let go of who I was or who I thought people thought I was. If I was disappointing people because I didn't have the next big thing already planned. Realizing that I was no longer, I went from being the superstar gymnast to being the TV personality and Ottawa celebrity. And now I was like, what? And so it was kind of trying to figure out, what am I without people assuming that I have a title with it. So I probably did a lot of the biggest work then. Meditation.
That's a big thing. What am I? If I'm not a TV personality, if I'm not a gymnast, what am I?
And that was where the internal work really started. I started with meditation. For me, it was calming the brain because I was in a panic. Like I wasn't panicked, but it was like, what's next? What if? Should I have? It was the monkey brain that they talk about, and I don't think I would ever have landed where I've landed now had I not gone through this process of learning about the power of the mind and how we think and the energy that we give off, how we carry ourselves, the vibrations that we give off. Like I became the biggest book for me that I started with was The Untethered Soul. And from Michael A. Singer. And that was the book that started me on a journey of a bit more spirituality, of manifestation, of meditation. And I think through that, I eventually got to a place that allowed me to really figure out where I was going to have my purpose and what I was going to love doing. Because I spent 2.5 years doing the podcast, and I loved the podcast. It was my favorite thing to do because it was all the guests that I'd had on television that I'd have like on TV. Your TV segments are 4 minutes max. Yeah, right. And I would have all these fascinating guests who would talk for and I'd have to fill 4 minutes, and I'd be like it was like just like the tip of the iceberg. Yes. And so I remembered making a list of all of my favorite guests and their topics. And that's how my podcast, Living Your Life with Lianne Laing, started, was all of these guests that I'd had on that I wanted to expand. So I loved that part, of the job. So I did that for, 2.5 years. I had a ton of stuff that was going on. COVID hit. It was easy for me to transfer everything on camera. It was actually probably easier transition for me because I was so used to being on camera that I was able to switch a lot of the things to being virtual. And then in May of 2020, I was approached by the Ottawa Heart Institute.
Okay, before you go there, because I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So back before you left TV, I'm assuming you and your husband discussed it, and it was, or like you're a very driven person. I don't know
Yeah.
you, but I can tell you're very extremely driven, which is great. Did you guys discuss it? Was this like a joint discussion?
My husband called my job at the time the life ruiner.
Oh,
Like that's how he referred to.
Okay.
Yeah, I was exhausted. I was getting up at 3. Like I would fall asleep at dinner parties on a Friday night.
Nice.
Like Friday nights for me were the worst. I had the entire week, had still been up at 3:30 in the morning on Friday. By the time I had fallen asleep a number of times. Just I couldn't really go out late. We couldn't stay out late. I had to be
Right.
up. Like it wasn't ideal, and I was exhausted all the time. And even if we went on vacation, it took me almost the entire vacation just to
Oh yeah.
sleep and to regain
Unwind,
anything.
yeah.
So no, Tony was really he was incredible about my transition. And I felt
Did he
bad for him
encourage you to
because
stop?
he didn't encourage me to stop. He encouraged me to follow my gut.
Okay.
Like for me, it was just he knew, and
No, sorry,
he
it's not
knows me.
stop TV. I mean, stop it after TV. Like, encourage you to take a pause.
No, because I think we were a bit in the panic of okay, now what?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And my husband is an incredible artist. He's a professional sports artist, but he doesn't have like I was this steady, insurance, health coverage, all of those
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, and my husband's done incredibly well, but he paints and he's commissioned. Like it's a very different set. So
Sure.
I don't know if he felt a little bit more of the pressure at that point, but he was incredible. Even as the time was going on, and I'm doing my podcast for free, and I'm building out this business.
Yeah.
I think he had such faith in knowing like I'm driven, I'm competitive, all
Yes.
those things that he couldn't wait. He was, I think, more excited to see where I was going to end up.
Great.
Yeah.
So then you do the podcast, and you eventually get to.
So the Ottawa Heart Institute, I had a headhunter reach out to me.
Okay.
And the message was really, I'd like to have a confidential conversation with you. And so I had no idea. I mean, I'd always known about the Ottawa Heart Institute. I lived in
course.
Ottawa. And to be honest with you, my dad died of a heart attack at the day after he turned 57. He was very young. It definitely is what inspires the work that I do.
Of course.
So I went and looked up what the job was. Like I was like, why is the Heart Institute or this headhunter calling me? And then I realized that the lead job was open. It was the head of the foundation.
What did they see your qualifications to be?
Well, they called, and I had 3 names of friends who I knew in the industry that would likely take on the president's job, right? And I'm like, oh, I bet you're calling. I figured I was a reference.
Okay.
When he called me
Right.
confidential, I was like, I'm someone's put my name down as a reference
Sure.
for one of these individuals who is an ideal candidate for this job. And he's like, no, actually, we're calling for you. And I said, yeah, that's a hard no for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not a fundraiser. I'm not like no. And so then I hung up the phone and I go downstairs to Tony and I'm like, I had the weirdest conversation.
Yeah.
They called, but they were actually like, it wasn't about so-and-so, it was for me. And he looked at me and he goes, you are passionate about health and wellness. He goes, your network in the city is incredible.
Yeah.
You are a storyteller. You are part of this world. Your dad died of a heart attack. Like you are all about prevention and wellness and living healthy. 80% of heart disease is preventable with healthy physical diet. And, and he's like, change the dialogue, change the storyline. He goes, this is perfect for you. And so I kind of thought about it and I took myself out of what the expectations were, and I kind of reflected and sat with it and said, what could I create that would make me feel purposeful in this job and energized to go to work every day? Like, what could I make this job into that would make me successful and be able to be a great leader, but not under the circumstances of why they were hiring me, if that made any sense. So when I called the headhunter back, I said, here's what I'm coming to you with. This is what I could do for you. And I said, if we can change the dialogue a bit or the expectations, or for me to understand that I would be leading a team who already have people who know how to do certain things, let me create something new. And that was the start of our conversation. And I said, because as soon as I said, yeah, man, I knew it was my job. Like I knew, I don't know if you talk about the energy or the universe or just being aligned, like once I was in that mindset, I was like, this job is mine because I'm so aligned
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
So what was this vision that you had that to change the dialogue?
It for me, it wasn't about fundraising. It wasn't about asking people for money. It was about what could we do? What could we share? How can we educate? How can we build awareness? How can another daughter have her dad walk her down the aisle because I didn't?
Yeah.
It was, how do I change the conversation? And I have the ability to do that with storytelling and with conversations and with connecting people. And I made it more about, I just made it more about that than sitting in a conversation and asking someone to donate to the Heart Institute. And
So is coronary artery disease still the number one killer?
yeah, heart disease is the number one killer worldwide, especially, you know, and not to downplay, like there's devastating disease in the world, but
Lots.
you know, breast cancer is 1 in 8, heart disease is 1 in 3 for women. And they don't know
Really?
that. Yes.
More than men? Is it more than men?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it is the leading cause worldwide, but in factors other than like heart disease leads women, like they don't know their symptoms. They don't know their risk factors. It is completely different than, you know, the Hollywood heart attack. You know, when we talk about heart attacks, we envision a white man in his 70s at a restaurant grabbing his chest and falling off the chair. Like that is what we've been exposed to.
Yes.
And it's very different.
Very different.
I
have friends acquaintances who training for a triathlon and dropped dead. Right?
It's a devastating, especially when...
Like, so it looks, when I had my heart surgery, I was super fit. Like, you wouldn't look at me and go, this guy's going to have heart problems, you know, or mine was artery problems. But you would look at him and go, okay, this guy's going to live forever.
Right. And unfortunately, I mean, the stories that I hear, like it's devastating. And then most of the time too, for women, there are so many other risk factors and so many other symptoms that present themselves that they're just not educated about. But, you know, being in the hormonal shifts, like there's so many issues that happen in pregnancy that they're never warned that because you had, you know, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, preeclampsia or the prediabetes in pregnancies or delivering early. Like those are all critical factors in issues later on in life, but they're not talked about. It's not something you have a conversation with. At that time, they're just happy that you've delivered safely and that your baby's healthy, right? But they're not kind of going through, there's a lot of situations that happen post baby.
Can we dig into this? Because this is really fascinating for me. Obviously, I'm thinking it from a man's point of view, but also from a woman's point of view. So I think that heart disease is, although we know it's a number one killer, it's not talked about a lot. It's like people just get like, and for a man, I'll just push through. Oh, I'm having chest pains. Oh, I'll just push through that. So I'll tell you how I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
I was training. I was running on treadmills. I was training with my trainer, and he had me sprinting on the treadmill. I was training for a fight, and as I was sprinting, I was running out of breath, and I'm like, okay, you know, and there was a bit of pain in my chest, and I'm like, all right. I had to stop, and I said, okay, well, it's just a bad day. I'm going to push through this. Like, I'm going to push harder. You know, this is my mentality, right? And you're a competitive athlete.
No, I know exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to push hard. I'm going to push through this. It's just a bad day or a bad couple of days. And it got to a point where I thought, okay, I never even really gave it a lot of thought. I'm at my doctor's, my GP, just doing my regular annual checkup. And at the end, he says, is there anything else? And I tell him about a rash I have on my elbow. And then he says, anything else? And I'm like, and I'm telling you, Leanne, this was just an aside. I'm like, well, you know, when I train, I get a little bit of chest pain. Well, right away, you know, he hooks me up with a cardiologist and off I go into tests and stuff. But I really made nothing of it.
You had a good doctor.
I had a great doctor.
That right there is a first sign, because oftentimes,
he saved my life. He saved my life. Now I'm going to tell you another story that you're going to think I'm nuts, because a few years later, I'm training, actually 2 years ago, I'm training, doing hill training and all that. And I'm getting, my right arm's going numb. And I'm struggling. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to push. This is brilliant, Doug, because I had a double bypass a few years before that. I'm going to push through this. This is just, I did mention it to my trainer. I'm like, I don't know. Should I really be worried about this? Two bonehead men were, you know. Anyways, turns out I needed a stent.
So you'd had a double bypass, and then a couple years later, you needed a stent.
Yeah, a few years later, yeah. And it was 100% blocked artery, but luckily, by the grace of God, I had a secondary artery that was going around it. It was trying to pick up the load. And so when I would train, I would feel that, my arm would go numb and whatever. But I was ready to like push through it again, even though
That's how stubborn, like that's how.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And the problem was with my dad is what I didn't realize is when I was going through my dad's items is that he'd had a ton of Pepto-Bismol and a ton of heartburn medication.
Right.
And my dad's was an immediate, like we lost my dad immediately. He was on the golf course. But he'd probably had a whole bunch of minor instances.
Oh yeah, he's probably,
like he had and so
this is
while
why it's
I was
important
angry
to
at my dad, there's a bit of, once you get through the shock and stuff, like it was like, why didn't you, like, why am I finding all of these items? And he'd been quite athletic, but he started to have a girth, a hard stomach. And I'm like, and I was mad at myself because I knew better.
Yes.
Like, why didn't I, as a daughter, recognize some more of these signs or acknowledge that his stomach was getting bigger? Like, and so these are things that are behind my passion and ensuring that it doesn't happen to other people, or how do we get the messaging out, or,
So the messaging isn't necessarily fund the Heart Institute. It's about,
why am I asking you to fund the Heart Institute? Why I need to give you something of value. How can I help improve your life? How can I help you make positive changes? How can there are people who, 80% of heart disease is preventable. So there are always going to be people who are born with genetic conditions, or like their heart disease exists. And we are incredibly lucky that the Heart Institute is one of the top 10 cardiac centers in the world. If you make it to the Heart Institute, if you make it through our doors, it's a 99% chance. A lot that you are going to get
experience.
I'm very fortunate that I get to have lots of very positive conversations with people who literally have been given the gift of time. But I know that my dad never made it to the Heart Institute.
Yes.
He never had the opportunity.
Yes.
And so for me, it's like, if I can buy those people time that they know they can get to the Heart Institute, then we will have everything they need. We have the most incredible surgeons, cardiologists, our nurse,
your nursing staff,
I'm working,
by the way, is unbelievable.
They're unbelievable. Like, I hear stories, they make me want to cry. There's days when I just sit there, I'm like, this place is incredible. But I feel like it is a true gem. I don't think I could do this work for anyone or anything else, right? There's a reason why I'm there. And the research that is happening is like science fiction that's turning into science fact. Like, the scientists are coming up with these new treatments and new designs. Like, we have one scientist who's created the right chemical solution. It took him 2,000 attempts, but he found the solution with nanogold particles to be able to spray a Band-Aid around the heart. Wow. So you go through heart surgery, they spray the Band-Aid, and then do you know what I mean? Like,
that's crazy.
You think about your recovery time, that there's a protective Band-Aid over your heart that's been, there's just really interesting things that are happening.
It's unbelievable.
That I get to talk about. And, I started in July of 2020 and knew that he was in the process of going through this. And it's, a couple years later, and now we know that this formula exists, and now it's like the patents, and there's just really interesting things that are happening. So, it's not always about asking for money. For me, it's about the dialogue and the conversations and being able to help people, because I know if they need it, if they need us, if they need the Heart Institute, then they've got the right people in place to do the work.
Yeah, it's so my experience with the Heart Institute was wonderful. I mean, heart surgery wasn't wonderful.
No, yes.
But the people, my surgeon was brilliant and such a kind soul. And I remember he came in the night before and he said, how you doing? I said, I'm doing fine. All I got to do is go to sleep. I said, how are you doing? I jokingly said, you don't drink, right? Like, you're not going to have any drinks tonight. He laughed, but he was super. And the nurses were unbelievably compassionate. And so that's why the experience was horrific in some ways, but
it's terrifying, right?
It was the best of that kind of potential situation.
And I think, for most situations at the Heart Institute, when you come out of there, you've literally been given the gift of time.
Yes.
You have been given years to your life. And I think that's what's very different. And the amount of gratitude and the desire to go on and to make changes and to be there to see life events is so, it's so critical, but it happens. Like, that's what we see. You know, there are devastating consequences. The heart failure is a real thing. Like there's so many different elements to it, but really at the end of the day, if you've come in and you've had a stent, you've had a bypass, you've like, they've saved your life. Yes. And it's a very different experience than being in other places where that doesn't,
And that was life
that
altering.
You're not happy to be there.
That was life altering for me. Not having heart problem, having post-surgery, reflecting on the fragility of life and, how, like with your father, it's just, life is fragile. And I had a whole bunch of mind shifts after that about work and stress and, work comes with stress, businesses come with stress, but how to manage that, how to take care of myself differently. And like you said, a lot of it is preventable. And so I have genetics that
So I was going to say, like, I'm looking at you and you've done this health and wellness podcast, right? Like you've checked all of the boxes. Like the genetic component is a very difficult one.
Well, I look at it this way. Genetics is like a serious determining factor of disease or health.
Well, and especially with heart disease, like the family history is huge. Like to the point where I'm concerned, and I'm concerned for my brother, because we lost our dad young and my dad lost his dad young. So I have a family history. So I'm aware of it.
But you know what to do.
I think so. But I would hope, just like you on your bike, kind of going, I don't know, or the doctor saying anything else and you're like, it's an afterthought.
Yeah.
I hope that, God forbid, that I've done enough webinars on women's heart health that I'm like, hey, this
Lianne.
You've been talking about this to all of these women who would prefer to finish their dinner party. Like I've talked to women who didn't go to the hospital because they wanted to clean the dishes after their dinner party and got to the hospital and they were in the midst of having a heart attack. But for them, it's like, don't want to interfere with the company and make sure that the kitchen's clean after hosting a dinner party before I go to the hospital while I'm having a heart attack. Like, these are stories that we hear all the time. And it's I don't know, I can say this, but we become our worst enemies. Like, it'll pass.
And it's easy to just sort of, I'm having this chest pain or I'm having this symptom. It'll go away, or I'll take a aspirin and I'll feel better or whatever. But, I think what the Heart Institute does is so essential, because you can disseminate information about symptoms. And I'd like to talk about symptoms for women and for men. It might be different. I don't know. Because you mentioned you've talked about women.
Well, the women present differently. There's different symptoms. Hormonal changes are huge. So in pregnancy, if there's issues with pregnancy, and also when we're dealing with menopause, there's a lot of different things that kick in. There's a lot of different blood tests that you can get done. There's a lot of different questions you can ask. But I don't want to say something wrong because I don't have all the medical expertise to be able to do it. Do you know what I mean? But also our symptoms present differently. We don't have this big ache. It presents in its jaw. Sometimes it comes on as almost like an anxiety. Like, that's the problem. Women go to the emergency room and then sometimes they're often told that they have anxiety or they're being emotional because we explain things differently and it can come across differently. Whereas men seem to kind of just state things. A woman will expand and talk and then it just comes across as they've crossed over the critical factors of like what they're actually feeling. So there's oftentimes when certain things can be missed.
So you're talking about
it
hormonal
comes up
shifts.
In the gym. Yeah.
So there can be hormonal shifts in pregnancy, but there's also
and
perimenopause.
Yeah, perimenopause, menopause.
That's huge that's a whole nother topic, perimenopause, and how that's treated or not treated and how it's seen for women. Like, I know we
can chat for like hours on that. I could sit and talk with Vonda, I'm sure, now.
I'm pretty sure she is perimenopausal now. And she's getting treated for, hormone replacement therapy, whatever. But so the hormonal shifts can cause issues for women.
Yes.
So the hormonal shifts for men can, but the hormonal shifts for men is kind of less obvious, but it's easily treatable. Like, I'm on TRT. I know that's a lot of doctors don't like that, but I do TRT, and it makes all the difference for me in terms of so many factors. But for a woman, there's a whole bunch of imbalances in hormones. Mine's testosterone. My testosterone's off. It's off. A woman, it's estrogen, it's progesterone, it's this, it's that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different. There's either high, low estrogen, testosterone. There's so many things that are part of it. I would really recommend, the Heart Institute and the foundation, we power the Canadian Women's Heart Health Center, which is actually here in Ottawa. There's a ton of information. There's some great webinars, some great, online talks that really break down what you need to be looking for, what symptoms, what risk factors are different. There's lots of information out there. It's just we just don't talk about it, and it's people aren't being guided in the right direction. We host an event every year called Jump In for Women's Heart Health. It's a 30-day, all through September, 30 minutes a day. But the biggest thing is to raise money for the Canadian Women's Heart Health Center,
right? Because
it's an alliance around the country, and it's about informing women and getting the right information out. And with that, we've done webinars and a ton of stuff. So there's great information on there. That website is jumpinnow.ca, but also if you look up the Canadian Women's Heart Health Center, and if you're looking and you're like, okay, because Lianne didn't mention all of them and I don't want to give the wrong medical,
sure.
I would go there and be able to really see the information that you need. Yeah.
So getting information out though. So so what is your official title, by the way?
President of the Ottawa Heart Institute Foundation.
Wow. Okay. So you're the president of the foundation. Of course, the end goal is you need to raise funds for the foundation.
You need to raise a lot of funds.
Yeah. You need to raise a lot of funds. No question. But you're approaching it in a different rather than just going out and saying, hey, give money. It's, giving information, sharing stories. You guys have a magazine, I think.
We have magazines. We have letters.
You feature people's stories.
Yeah. We also have Joel Haslam, I worked a lot of years with him. He was an award-winning storyteller. He does a ton of great stories for us for Heart Month. These are, really interesting. We're finding really fascinating stories that I think show a different side to heart disease. Like we had a family this Heart Month. It was the father, the wife, the sister, the son, the other son, and the sister-in-law, all within the same family, all having had bypass surgery.
Oh, wow.
But you talk about family genetics.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that was a really interesting story as to how they all evolved and how over the course of their lifetime, when the heart disease hit. And so that was a really interesting story. We had Kenton Lair, who is the executive chef at the NAC. He put out a fire in the kitchen and inhaled, and it caused her an infection, and he went into heart failure.
Oh, really?
Do you know what? So it wasn't like he's, the typical, it was a certain circumstance caused it, but the next thing you know, he's waking up a couple days later having had a heart attack and was treated at the Heart Institute. We have a story that's coming out for Father's Day. This was a father who was fishing with his son and caught the fish, and it ended up the hook ended up it went right through his hand, so he wiped it off in the lake, and just washed the hands, and he ended up with a massive bacterial infection, which infected. It took them months to figure out why he lost almost 100 pounds. They couldn't figure it out, but it ended up being a bacterial infection that affected his heart, and he went into heart failure.
Wow.
These are all different circumstances. It's not always just the Hollywood heart attack that causes people to need the work and the help of the Heart Institute. So, there's lots of, really interesting stories.
Those are fascinating stories, actually.
Do you know what? They're just different, but they're just stories that can be told, and how then lifestyle changes. And we've had some that were really individuals who are sedentary and diabetic and inactive. There's lots of different things, and
I find it frustrating when someone's diagnosed. When I was diagnosed, I remember they did the stress test and a bunch of other tests. And at the end, they said, there's probably 10 people in the room sitting, waiting for the results. And they dismissed everybody and they said, well, you should stay. I'm like, oh, it's probably not good. But after having my, what do they call that? The angiogram, they determined that I had two arteries that need to be bypassed. And one was the main artery, so they couldn't stent it. So I was sitting beside a woman, and she had been diagnosed, and she had a couple of blocked arteries, 90%. And she was telling her friend to get her French fries and a Coke. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, doesn't it? It is
it's come on. And it's none of my business, but I had another friend who
but you
had
hope
a massive heart attack.
If you check in with this woman, maybe after having had her incident, Hopefully.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I had a friend who had a massive heart attack, off work for 6 months, cuts back to work. And I remember talking to him. I said, "Oh, so you're drinking green juice now?" And he goes, "No, I still smoke. I eat my burgers." I'm like, "Oh, like isn't this a sign to you that you really need to do something different?" Because there is genetics too, and or it could be hormonal imbalances. But the way I look at it is genetics determine a direction I could be heading in, but I can shift it. Mm-hmm. I can't change my genetics. What I can do is shift my chances of survival by exercising, by eating well. And, my new eating well is better than my old eating well. And, these are things I think people need to know as well, that don't just give up. Oh, it's genetic. I'm done.
No, there is that. And then, you hope the majority of people who have been given the second chance shift lifestyle, but it's difficult. Like, you're active and healthy and it's part of your lifestyle. Like I view physical activity, it's like my favorite part of the day. Like yes. I've been doing it since I was 6. Like, in fact, my husband will often say, if I'm being bitchy, like, have you been to the gym? Like, have you had your workout? Yeah. Like, I need the endorphins. Like, I crave the endorphins of a physical activity. And that's just been my life. And I don't understand how people don't have that. But the majority of people don't have that. They don't crave going to the gym and like looking at a salad going, oh my God, that looks delicious.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So it's hard, and the smoking is a huge thing. I mean, smoking, is literally the number one risk factor. Like you need to cut that out, and vaping. But the smoking cessation program that they have at the Heart Institute is one of the top things, and it's a program that's been expanded around the world because it's an incredible program that was developed. But it's hard to tell someone to stop smoking. They're addicted. Like, especially
now vaping. Vaping has made
smoking
worse for young people so easy.
And they're getting them addicted really early with these flavors. Early. Yeah, it's devastating what vaping has done. But it's difficult. But there are programs at the Heart Institute and prevention and wellness. They now have programs that are working with a lot of our patients because they need to be able to lose weight and be healthier just to survive surgeries. And so there's a lot of them that actually have to go through the program prior to be able to be in a state where they could recover and undergo the surgery and be able to do rehab and be able to make it through. And how difficult would that be to know that you have to go through this process so that you can save yourself, and be able to recover from these surgeries. So there's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of information once you've had a surgery unexpectedly, to wake up and then realize you have to make all of these lifestyle changes.
Hopefully, yeah.
But you hope that they wake up and then I hear way more positive stories of people who have changed their lifestyle and quit smoking and are now walking, their 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day and love it and are grateful. Like there's a mixture of everybody in this world.
Yeah. I'm more like similar to you. I'm very driven. So as soon as I had my heart surgery, as soon as I could, I was training and I was doing as much exercise as I could. I even tried hill training a couple months later. I mean, I was huffing and puffing walking up the hill, but I remember going to see, because they have a follow-up physiotherapy.
Yeah, and hopefully you weren't lifting a certain amount of weight. Like I have learned that people want to go in, and I'm like, no, you actually can't do that. Like you have to learn how to heal. Yeah.
But I was doing what I could, knowing, the limitations, but I wasn't letting my mind, because the mind is a powerful thing. And if my recovery followed my mind, I probably wouldn't have recovered quickly. But I said, well, my mind has to follow my body, and I'll just pay attention to my body and do what I can do. And I went for the follow-up physiotherapy, and she was saying, walk this. I was saying, oh, I'm already doing hill training. She said, oh. I don't think she was that impressed, but it worked out fine for me. I really felt like driven to get better quick. Within the limitations.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope you stayed within those limitations.
I knew that my chest bone had been cut open, right? So I knew that, like,
you had open heart.
Yeah. So like any bone, it had to heal. It takes 12 weeks to heal, right? So I knew that I wasn't going to be doing chest presses in the first few months, but, walking up a hill or whatever, my body told me when I couldn't go any further. If I walked up the hill, I'd get halfway up the hill and I'd walk back down. And anyways. But the mind is a powerful thing to drive the body forward as well.
And to allow it to rest and heal and take time.
That's the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, I'm just, how, and that you went through it a second time, but
Yeah, that's just me being a bonehead, by the way. Like me ignoring those symptoms. Hopefully, Lianne, the third time. Hopefully, it's
well,
not the third time.
hopefully we're good.
Yeah, but hopefully we're good now. That artery was already blocked when I had my bypass, but it wasn't. I guess they decided not to bypass it. But apparently, the ones that are already damaged tend to get continue to get blocked. So, anyways,
I'm learning every day. Like honestly, like I've had to learn a lot of medical and understand a lot of the differences. It's a fascinating world. Yeah,
my bypass arteries are perfect. So they've been tested.
Yeah.
When I had the angiogram for the one that eventually became a stent,
they could see how great the other ones were looking.
So that's a good sign, right? The new arteries are not picking up any plaque. And, I'm doing things naturally, as natural as possible. And I'm not suggesting that's for everybody, but so I want to go back to women and signs and symptoms and what they can do. I mean, I think it's challenging diet is a big thing, I think. And diet, people are very attached to their food. And in North America, like there's an emotional attachment to food. And so if you tell someone, well, you should cut back on sugar, it's like, sugar? Tell me something else, like cut back on protein.
But you look at European, you look at some of these blue zones, like it's fascinating to see what lifestyle and a certain kind of diet and food can do and how people live very different lives. And you look at you sit and look at a Mediterranean diet, and then you go down into one of the big states and you've got your oversized cheesecake factory meals and everything. And it's just, there's perspective.
I was in Chicago with some friends last year, I think, and we went to this steakhouse, and they had these desserts that were ridiculous. I don't even know how to say it. It's like half a pie. Like I want a piece of pie for it's half the pie, and it's this thick.
Yeah,
and
you just need really a spoon and like a bite or two, satiate yourself, and then move on. But we don't. It's all around us. It's fast food. It's our lifestyle, and it's very hard to change. I mean, it really starts when you're a child and being introduced to the right foods and the right habits, and it's very difficult to do, especially if that's not been something.
So how do you get this information out? So part of your driving factor behind, I think it's a perfect fit for you, is. Your dad died 2 weeks before your wedding. He didn't walk you down the aisle.
No.
And, I'm sure that was...
And he was so young.
And he was so young, and I'm sure that's extremely painful for you.
I look at it now, and when I see my friends were all, like starting to surpass the age, like I realize how young my dad was and how much life he had ahead of him. And yeah, it was... And it was one of those days I had actually... just had my test makeup done for my wedding, when you kind of...
Yes.
So it was a beautiful day in June. I had just had my makeup done, so I was feeling like $1,000,000. My dad is playing golf with my fiance at the time. It was like Tony was with my dad.
Oh, wow.
And so, but it was one of those brilliant days. It was such a gorgeous day. My dad and Tony are golfing, and to get that phone call, it was just... it's like life, like there's a before and there's an after of that life-changing event. And so I think it triggered something in me, and I'm so grateful that I really think like the shingles and the wake up was almost like this was the path that I needed to follow to be able to find this purpose. But it is a big factor.
Did you guys consider delaying the wedding?
No, because I knew my dad.
Oh.
Like, my dad was one of those guys, like, are we allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, sure. Go nuts. Yeah.
Like, he would have been like, are you fucking kidding me? All of this, and you're going to, I knew my dad would have been like, he would have been pissed that I didn't go through with it. It was a very different wedding than I had planned. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it was, I look back on photos, like, I think I was in survival mode, but it was one of those, we just wanted to get through. Yeah.
So you're a mother. I think one of the responsibilities as parents. So one of my driving factors to be healthy is I have an 8-year-old son, and he's my favorite person on the planet, And so I have a responsibility to stick around as long as I can, as long as God allows me to stick around. But I have to participate in that. I can't just sort of roll the dice and hope for it, and especially because I have, genetics that say my arteries will get blocked probably over time or whatever, that I could do a whole bunch of things. People ask me, what should I do? And I'm reluctant to tell them, because if I told them everything that I do, they'd be, that's
Yeah, but
just
you're
way too much.
hardcore.
Yeah, I'm
Like
hardcore,
you are
yeah.
a hardcore athlete,
Yes.
and most people don't look like you at, I don't know if you've
25?
yeah,
63.
exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a different level, and I'm really competitive, and I'm still trying to be as fit as I possibly can at my age. My husband sometimes is like, you're doing okay. And I'm just like, no, I'm not at the level that I want to be at, but we're at a different mind
If you're like that, by the way, I don't think we ever reach a level that we want to
never really reach a level of ever being content. You're always kind of wanting more, but the general, like, there's so many basic things that we could be doing. Basic things. Walk after a meal.
Yes.
Quit smoking. Watch your blood pressure. If you're
it's good to see that
pre-diabetic, watch
smoking-
your, diabetes is a huge risk factor. But it can be, there's medical interventions, but also like it can be controlled with diet.
Yes.
It takes effort, and some people just don't want to put in the effort. And the problem is you don't put in the effort, like, you're going to be dealing with sickness later in life. And that's what's frustrating, is that people have the ability to make these changes and to be healthy, and they choose they choose the easier route now and then deal with sickness later.
So we have so much knowledge now. Like even insulin resistance, now they call type 3 diabetes, right? Which is really a precursor to type 2, which is a precursor to whatever. And like you said, diabetes is a huge factor, and that's around diet. You can control type 3 easily. You can control type 2 with diet, with a good, healthy diet, And so
you need to move your body 30 minutes a day. But you need to start by walking around the block. Like, sometimes it's as much, and sometimes for some people, that's a very difficult task.
Have we seen a rise in heart disease?
Well, we're seeing a rise in heart failure right now just because of the aging population. So we are seeing the statistics starting to change because the boomers are reaching that age.
What about the we have a bit of a weight issue in Canada that we didn't used to have. People are overweight now, a lot more since COVID, especially.
Well, yeah, and also but also the price of food. Like, it's expensive to eat healthy. I go and I look at my groceries now, and it's painful.
It's ridiculous.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's very difficult for a family who's living on a very fixed income, and you're seeing the rise in prices, and it's a very difficult choice, and the fast food and even fast food's expensive.
I don't know. I don't eat fast food. I haven't eaten for years, but.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I will admit that there are times when, like, we'll give in for an A&W burger.
Yes.
Like, I'm a teen burger. My kids are a Papa burger. Like, but that's like $50. Like,
Is
the
it
burger,
really?
like, it's like even that's
What happened to
expensive
the $2
now.
burger? I mean.
Like, do you know what I mean? So, it's.
But
it
walking
takes energy.
is free.
Walking is free.
Like moving is free.
Yeah, I know. But it's sometimes it needs to be. It's fear based. You need to be in a situation where it's like you're forced to make these decisions, and you hope that families kind of invest in themselves.
So do you do any of that in terms of? It's easy to raise funds, I would imagine, from people like myself who've been through the process and been through the Heart Institute.
And a lot of our donors are grateful patients. I mean, that's the thing with the Heart Institute is there's a lot of grateful patients.
Of course, I'm one of them. I'm extremely grateful, like crazy grateful. And maybe my son, when he has money, will give because he's grateful his dad lived an extra 20 or 30 years because of it. But it's everybody else. Everybody else, So we just had how many women are?
1 in 3. It's 1 in 8 for breast cancer, 1 in 3 for women.
That's insane. That blows my mind. What is it for men? Do you know?
I don't know what it is for men, but it is the leading cause worldwide.
So it's huge.
Death.
It's massive. Like, to get information out to people because they can live longer, a healthier, better life, if not for themselves, for people who love them, because actually death is the easy way. It's the people that are left behind that suffer, and So how do you get that information out? So, because I think those people would want to give to the Heart Institute as well, because it was 1 in 3. 1 in 3. That's a lot. That's like,
Well, it's a lot. And so we established Jump In for Women's Heart Health. It's an initiative that we're looking to carry across the country, and you have to build it.
what is it?
What is it called?
No, what is it? Like, what is Jump In?
Oh, Jump In. It's a 30-day. So it's the month of September. It's 30 days of activity. So
Okay.
30 days in September.
Is it guided activity?
30 minutes of physical activity. I have trainers. The first year we had trainers from around the country that provided free workouts, free ideas. We had so many things. Running room was involved. Good Life Fitness was giving away a week for people to try a gym, like across the country. Like, we are getting partners involved. We have so much information. We literally had Pilates, yoga, HIIT workouts, band workouts, tramp. Like, we had everything provided for people to try.
How well does that work? Like, how successful is that?
It was great. We had over 1,000 people the first year to come in on a first year event like it's building it. Like, if you build it, they will come. You just try to hope that this is something that will gain momentum. So these are this is part of what I'm doing. It's like, how can we build things out to be able to raise awareness, have a conversation, even doing things like this, It's an opportunity to tell a story.
So is there a website they can go to for
Jump In? Yeah, we're actually going to be starting, because we're looking for registration all through August, and then hopefully come September. So that's jumpinnow.ca.
Jumpinnow.ca.
And that's for Jump In for Women's Heart Health. We're just kind of starting to get rolling on getting this year's organized. We just came off of, it feels like, but February is Heart Month, is a massive month here in Ottawa, where we have the Light the Capital Red, where we had red buildings all around the city to try to help build awareness around what the Heart Institute is doing. Heart Month is a great ability for people here in the city to raise over $1.2 million, and that's made up of like $10, $20, $50 donations.
Right.
So you imagine how many of those make up the million. So
I think that's an important factor. You don't have to be wealthy to give. $1, $10.
Yeah. And Heart Month allows people to really feel connected to what we have here in the city. Like, anyone who's familiar with cardiac care or heart disease around the world is familiar with the Heart Institute.
Yes.
Like, we are, when we say we are world renowned and world recognized, we now have fellows and residents coming from around the world coming to Ottawa to study. They're studying under our surgeons. They're studying the new procedures. Like, Dr. Ruel created a procedure. It's called the Ottawa procedure. People are traveling from around the world to learn how to do it from him and then take it back to we have France and Japan, and like all of these different countries are coming here. So, when you're able to, the $10, the $20 for you to feel like you're helping support the Heart Institute, it's important.
Yeah.
You feel like a part of it.
Yeah. I think this is a really important message, because I used to think, the billionaires will take care of all the problems. It's like, no, I have my piece of the pie that I can give. If it's $10, if I can afford $10, I'll give the $10. I mean, we're 1 million people in Ottawa. If half of them gave $10, that's $5 million. That's a lot of money.
Imagine that. Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about it like that. Yeah.
That's not,
I didn't even think. Yeah, I like that way of thinking.
I think actually let's go with that. $10 for 500,000 people.
Let's try to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
But they'll eventually need the care. Someone in their family might.
Somebody's going to need the care. Somebody they know is going to need the care. Well, Lianne, I don't even know why you agreed to come on the show. I'm so grateful that you did, though.
Well, I did, but honestly, it was also a chance, when you hear about, and I'm grateful that you've said that you're a patient, right?
Yes.
But when you can have conversations and, and be able to talk about things that you're passionate about, and I actually haven't done a podcast in a long time. So when they were like, and I'm like, actually, it's going to be talking about health and wellness. And I'm like, why wouldn't I want to come and have an opportunity to do that? And to also learn your story.
Yeah.
These are all parts of what we're doing is sharing these stories. So I might have a conversation with somebody and like, actually I met this guy. He's, hardcore athlete, had already had a double bypass and was still kind of going, oh, I wonder why my hand's like this.
Yeah, that's right.
So your story might end up in one of my conversations.
I should be the story of what not to do. Yeah. Well, you do a really important thing. And I am, being a recipient of heart surgery aside, I think it's, just knowing the statistics of heart issues in North America alone is what you're doing is so important. And the Ottawa Heart Institute is an amazing facility. And I think it's more amazing now because when I went there, they hadn't built the new part.
We hadn't built the new towers. We had a massive, almost $100 million build. We have new towers, new hybrid operating rooms. Like we're staying put.
Yeah.
I know there's another hospital being built.
There's
a big one being built, which we need in the city.
Yes.
We need it. But
your specialty.
We're our specialty. We're staying exactly where we are. We have an incredible facility. we're not going anywhere.
I think it's fantastic.
We're perfect.
So I hope you get a lot of job satisfaction, fulfillment, knowing that you're doing an amazing thing. You really are.
I get up excited every morning to go to work.
That's the best.
That's the best.
And you got to put whatever number of hours, I don't know how many hours you work, but if you're not excited about it, it's unfortunate, but I understand why you would be excited. Is there anything that we can, just before we close, that you can share with to get the message out there, to get people to look into maybe even giving that $10?
Yeah, you know what I could say right now, it's always wonderful to get donations and, to look up the Ottawa Heart Institute Foundation, and that's fantastic. But what I would really love to say is listen to your body. Maybe go see your family doctor. Maybe take a look at what your lifestyle is really like. Maybe see where can I make changes. Maybe look at your kids and say, I really want to walk them down the aisle.
Yeah. Yeah, do it for the kids. Well, thanks, Lianne. It has been amazing. I think I could have gone down so many rabbit holes, but tried to keep it in check.
No, I know, right? That's the beauty of podcasting.
I don't know how you did it in 4 minutes when you were on TV.
See, that's why I needed my own podcast.
Yeah. But
Thanks
fantastic.
A lot.
Thank you.